Hey everyone, welcome back. This is part two of five things I wish I could tell my younger self. Last week we did, or last episode we did part one, and we covered. If you want to listen to that first part and you haven't, we covered the themes around availability, pleasing others, and the ability to say no, chaos and drama, the idea of having it all together by a certain age, being busy or stressed aren't signs of success or value. And finally, your weirdness is your gift. So Ashley and I delved into some of those topics in our last episode, and we just wanted to continue on this one because I think when we think about what we wish we could have told our younger selves or what we wish we could tell our younger selves, I think there's also this feeling of celebrating how far we've come. I think it's a really great way of acknowledging um, I don't I don't function under those patterns anymore, or I'm much more aware of them and am able to, create a pause uh, before taking action from that place, before simply reacting from that place. And yeah, I've had a lot of fun just thinking about these things.
Yeah, I love the celebration that these things aren't really a part of our life. I mean, some of them are still a work in progress. I think we're still in relation. Like for me, I know some of the things we're going to talk about today. I'm still in relationship too. Um, but having said that, to be able to see how far we've come as individuals,
Mhm.
and a lot of these, I feel like create unnecessary suffering. A
Right.
lot of these are society's rules or family culture, or specifically to women. I think some of them are more than men. Um, so I think it's good to talk about them and just to like maybe we can just pass on to anyone listening that you might liberate yourself from some of these things that we've highlighted.
Yeah. I also love that from a metaphysical perspective, any time that we do any kind of healing or acknowledgement in the present moment, we are helping heal the younger parts of ourselves and even future versions of ourselves. So
Yes.
when we can remember that we are, in fact, timeless, limitless beings, we are actually rewriting and recoding um, the trajectory of our existence.
Hmm.
And that's
And
not, sorry, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
That's not something to take lightly. I think that that creates a different kind of outcome and synchronicities in our life.
Absolutely. It's hard to grasp the idea that we can heal our past and other lifetimes at the same time, and heal our future. But it is real. It's a real possibility, and so I love that you brought that in.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So as we continue, number six, and the first one for today is following your passion.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh. If I I think I
Yeah.
think of this list of 10, this is probably one of the ones that just really hit me the most. Um,
Mhm.
when I really think about it, I don't know that I had a passion. I think that I followed um, the formula that was tried and true. I was a really good student. I got really good grades. Um, I got into a good school. That went a different way, that went a different direction. But I think that if someone had spoken to me and said, you get to, that really life is about living from your passion, living from what you feel really connected to. And I know that there are a lot of people that actually still have a different opinion on this. I don't know how now.
What did they say?
That you're not really meant to live from your passion, you're meant to live from what you're good at or your talent.
Oh.
And I think that sometimes those two things can coincide, but I actually think that that's actually very limiting because
Mhm.
I think that you can be a good, assistant, but is that really what you're passionate about?
No, and I think passion is the soul's language, right?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think the soul loves passion, and if you're doing something that you're good at without that passion behind it, it's going to feel very differently. It's going to manifest very differently than if you're just doing something that like is rote and you're not like emotionally connected to. And I actually love this one because I feel like for most of my life, when I left home and college, I did follow my passion. Um, and I didn't understand that that is what I was doing until a few years ago.
Mhm.
Um, and somehow, in all the darkness that I've experienced, there was a voice inside me that was like, "Let's go do this," or spoke pretty loudly. And it's been incredible to watch how. And we've talked about this before, that like the soul's desire is the key to our evolution and our healing and all of
Mhm.
those things. So when that passion arises, we might think, oh, it's about moving to another country, or, for me, becoming a medium. We've talked about that before, or doing the podcast, whatever that brings. But it's actually, what happens in that process. Um,
Right.
so I just really encourage anyone to follow their passion and to see what unfolds. Like the minute you say yes, I'm surprised what I'm always surprised at what doors open or how things start to fall into place. If you show up for that passion, things are going to start clicking real quick.
Right. Right. Because I think that we have to be mindful, right? Because we can't define following our passion under societal standards and structures.
No,
I don't think that those two things coincide.
no.
I think that following our passion is so much more about who we become in the process and understanding that there are so many lessons in there that we're meant to grasp, we're meant to understand, and they can come in different ways and they will come no matter what. But to follow our passion doesn't necessarily mean that there is like a deadline or that there is there are specific outcomes that need to come from it. It's something that you really learn to dance with, I think, and you let it guide you to where it wants to go, to where it wants to take you.
Oh, yeah. And I think society has such a limited idea of the outcome of following our passion. I think usually it's based on money
Right.
or, oh my God, the word's not coming to me, but like how you're seen,
Hmm.
appearances.
Hmm.
Um, and in my experience, like that's not why I do it at all. I do it because it's so freaking fun
Yeah.
and it brings me so much joy and it expands me. And I learn so much about myself and the world and in the process. And my husband and I, like, he teases me. He's like, could you like work on like maybe manifesting some $1 million or some dollars, Because he's like, you seem to like follow your passion and find so much joy and creativity and expansiveness. He's like, could we add some money to that? But that's not why I've done that. But money follows.
Right.
Um, but spirit is so limitless that if we
Hmm.
follow our passion and allow that limitless nature of that energy, then I think we're going to be so pleasantly surprised at what comes, the people we're going to meet and the experiences we have and who we become in the process.
Absolutely. I think that one of the components of who we become in the process is we just get to know who we really are. So we are far less influenced um, by anything outside of that and telling us that no, that's not right or that's crazy or whatever it is. I think to have to follow your passion, to follow that soul's calling, there's an understanding there of no one knows what it feels like to carry this in my heart, and that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. I'm the
Mm-hmm.
only one who needs to know that. That creates a different level of confidence and self-assurance, um, that I think over time is appreciated because you realize that's exactly what I was meant to do all along. It's
Yeah.
really follow my own path.
Yeah. Yeah. And something hit me after I said what I said was that I haven't been passionate about money.
Mm,
And, I'm going to say this because I think this is important. In the past, money has had a lot of negative connotations. And I've done some healing around it recently and realized that money is energy and the energy of love and the divine. And
mhm.
so I'm going to say this here. I'm curious what'll happen now that I'm more passionate about money. I'm curious what is going to happen. And I even feel some like, ooh, gross. You supposed to say that? But then I'm like, no, no, no. That just means more expansiveness, more freedom, more love, more divinity. Money, spirit doesn't care. Money is not the energy of people, it's the energy of love. So, anyway, I'm
Right.
just going to say that now and we'll talk about what happens in a
I
few
love
minutes.
that. And if you come, if you get into a place of, ew, I don't want that, just tell me and I will be here to let you know, girl, you need to take that money now.
Right? I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm challenged. I'm ready.
Buy yourself something nice.
Oh, yeah. I think I just got a lot of nice things. But yeah.
Okay, the next one, which I think is also so, so powerful. Number 7 is giving yourself permission at any moment to do and be anything.
Mm,
Okay, so that comes with a lot of different layers. And to me, the way that this has been unfolding for me recently is the understanding that all we really have is now.
mm,
Yes, we have past experiences. There's a lot of things that have happened in my past, in your past. Everyone has a story. We have aspirations and dreams and all of the things for the future. But really, all we have is now, is the present moment.
mm,
And to give yourself the permission now to say, I'm going to choose to believe in this instead, or I am this instead of that. I no longer identify with that part of my life, with that part of my story. This is who I choose to be now.
mm,
I think that those are some of the most powerful practices we can begin to incorporate in our life.
mhm.
Because again, the power of now, I just realized, isn't there a book called that?
Yeah, Eckhart Tolle.
Right, right, right. The power of now is everything
Mhm,
because we are centered in I think when you recognize that, I think you're centered in your soul space. I think you're centered and connected to spirit.
mm. Yes.
And I think that it creates this ability to stop identifying so much with this external 3D reality and start creating a much deeper conversation, relationship, and identification with what we really are, which is
Mm,
source.
yes. Yeah, this is multi-layered. I think when you come into the present moment, often, not always, but often, you realize like there's nothing to be afraid of. Like I know I was thinking the other day about how fear has been a crutch, right? It's like fear is a part of my life and then it becomes something I lean on way too often. And when I lean on fear, it defines me. It defines my self-worth, it defines my light, it defines how I show up, how vocal I am, how I express myself. And it dims everything. And so when we come into the present moment and we recognize like in this moment there's nothing to be afraid of and we come back to that soul source, and we define ourselves from that soul source or that divinity, then anything is possible. Who we want to be in that moment, because that's from love, right? And that's where authenticity steps in, where we become the authentic expression of our soul. And that being in the moment makes that possible. And I really do believe that doing that, like intentionally stepping into that light and that love, will give us that permission to be whatever we want to be in that moment.
Right. And I think we have to remember that that space will always feel in the most basic terms good. Like
Mm,
it will always feel
always.
peaceful. It will always remind you that it is in fact all okay. And
Mhm,
that the only thing in that space that will contradict that truth is your mind.
mhm,
Because the mind is focused on the mind can be focused on what we don't have. The mind can be focused on the, you know, perhaps the very difficult reality that we may be living as human beings. And source and soul will always say, and still it is
Mhm.
all right.
Yeah. And we
And
need to remember, oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I just was going to say we need to remember it's it's no joke that even though we've all have a story and we've been through different things, the mind is naturally wired to focus on the negative. The mind is naturally wired to be more vigilant or maybe even edge towards hypervigilant. So if we know that, we can know that we can't always trust the mind unless we're actually in a dangerous situation. But we're not like back in the day where we're being chased by animals bigger than us. We're not in these like fight or flight modes in that sense. Most of these stories are created by our mind.
Hmm.
So I think it's important to remember that like we can't trust the stories of the mind and that you can trust the stories of the heart and soul.
Absolutely. I think that's an important thing too. I'm really noticing the I think there's an increase, maybe because it's of my awareness and where I'm at right now in my own process. But I think that a lot of times people have difficulty really accepting what we're talking about right now, because a lot of times it's been labeled as bypassing or what's it
Mm,
called? Toxic positivity.
right.
And I don't think I think that is so, it reduces the power of our soul
Yeah.
so much.
Mm,
You have to know within yourself whether you are in fact bypassing something.
mhm,
And I think that most people that are, I don't know, in my sphere in some way, shape, or form, probably most people who listen to this podcast are in some kind of therapy, counseling, have been, or, whatever. And I think that anyone who has been through that process or is going through that process of genuinely looking at their fears, at their limitations, at their trauma, at all of those things, you're not bypassing anything. You're doing what you need to be doing, even if you are allotting it, if you will, an hour a week.
mhm,
And I say this because a lot of times I think there is this idea that we need to be processing all day, every day, and
mm,
that we need to, you know, always just honor the trauma.
yeah.
I think there are variant degrees of everyone's process and journey. So
Yeah.
this isn't to, disrespect or dismiss where anyone is at. I think that all of that is true and is real and is powerful and impactful, and we cannot dismiss the knowing of spirit and our soul. We cannot dismiss that it is in fact true that source, that spirit within, is here in fact to remind us that it is all well, that it is all unfolding exactly as it should, that you are not getting it wrong.
Right. Absolutely. No,
So go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Go ahead.
Please, no, you go ahead.
Um, I just wanted to stress that because I think we see a lot of things where there's a back and forth where there's like, oh, I don't, am I bypassing? Am I, is this, I hate the term so much I constantly forget it. Oh, is this toxic positivity? All of those things. It's like, no.
Mhm,
Like, how do you feel about it? How do
right.
you feel about it? Do you know within yourself that you have in fact given space to your stuff? And can you still trust? Don't let those things and don't let these labels that are made so popular out there disconnect you from the power of source. Never, ever,
Mhm.
ever.
No, I 100% agree. Such a personal relationship and it's about being in integrity with yourself. So you need to decide. And sometimes we overprocess, we over identify with all of this stuff. And you and I have been working so hard on ourselves for so long that I can sit here and speak with you and know, like, I am not bypassing. I have built a relationship to that soul self, that soul part of me where I know how to come back to that light over and over again several times a day. And we did a whole episode on this. And if any of you listening are like, what does that look like? What does that feel like? I highly recommend that episode, which we talk about that.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I
Absolutely.
appreciate you bringing that in.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of power in that, and it would be a shame if we continue distancing ourselves from it because we're afraid that we're going to be judged in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
I'm okay with being judged for being too positive. That's fine. What's the alternative? Being miserable?
Right.
I've done that.
I love it so much.
Okay. So, number 8, staying in expired relationships. Oh my gosh. This one, I think this is expired romantic relationships, expired friendships, expired family ties, expired relationships with certain versions of ourselves, even, I think.
Mhm.
Um, what has really helped me personally in my own process and journey is the understanding, again, at a soul level, that I came here into this lifetime as this human being to remember who I am. When I came back, when I keep coming back to that truth, I understand how precious my remembering and my practice to remember that, to cultivate that is. And anything and anyone that doesn't support that,
Mm.
what's the point?
Right.
And this isn't, some expired relationships are harder to walk away from or to create strong boundaries around than others. But for me, what has really helped me come back to the space to, to not dwell either in guilt or doubt is no, I came here to remember who I am as a soul having a human experience. And when I focus on that, there is actually so much time, so much air quotes work, like intention that it takes to
Mm.
really nurture that, get to know that. When I'm in that space, nothing else matters. And there's no way that an expired relationship that was built on a previous version of myself is going to keep me away from that. For me, that's what that means at this point in my life.
Mm. I I agree. I feel like if we find ourselves betraying ourselves, editing our behavior, our self-expression,
Mhm.
um, diminishing ourselves, if we find like these certain behaviors in relationships, those are warning signs that this is not a relationship that's harmonious to our well-being.
Mhm.
If it makes us sick, if we are feel of dread, if we find ourselves making excuses. I mean, one big thing I see over and over again, and I know in the past I was guilty of this, like with my family. I think we all at some point can be guilty of this, but like we can go, well, they're so hurt. They have so much trauma. They've been through so much. And so
Mhm.
we start excusing and having over empathizing with someone's experience. And we
Mhm.
really need to know the difference between over empathizing and like our own boundaries and when we've betrayed ourselves. And I love that Maya Angelou quote, when someone shows you who they are, believe them. And I
Mhm.
think we don't want to believe them. We want to hope and trust in their potential and hang in there, whatever kind of relationship this is. And we stay too long. I see people stay too long. They wear themselves out. I see people stay for years and years and years and years and years. And that's not a judgment, but you see the breaking down of that person. They start to break down. They start to get physically sick. They start to fade,
Mhm.
all because everything they have is going with the hope that this relationship will get better, or this person will get better, or this parent will get better or be better. And, I've been thinking a lot lately because there's someone I know that's going through this. And I've been thinking a lot lately about like, and this person, didn't grow up in like a traumatic situation or traumatic, that idea that like we choose the love we know. I do believe that often. But I also feel like there's this natural part of us that sometimes wants to save people.
Mhm.
Um, and I think really need to check that. We
Right.
really need to check that because we can't save people. Everyone has inside themselves everything they need to heal. And
Mhm.
from a Buddhist perspective, which I really love and honor, you start with yourself first, compassion for self first. Put your
Mhm.
oxygen mask on first. And when you do that, that choosing of self, that choosing of your well being, that health is a mirror or a model for the collective. And it radiates out. When we choose love first, we honor something bigger. And we model that for people.
Right. Just because you can understand why someone would behave a certain way doesn't mean that you have to accept their
Mhm.
behavior that comes from that,
Yeah.
right? Doesn't mean that we have to accept what comes with their trauma, with their
Mhm.
stuff,
Mhm.
no matter how much you can understand it. And a lot of times, the best thing, the most kind and loving thing that we can do, especially for the people that we love, is allow them to have their experience, allow them
Yes.
to have their lessons.
Yes.
I don't think we realize how much we hinder people's progress
Oh, that's
when we
such a good
try when we try to save them.
point.
Not only do we hinder their progress, we hinder ours,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's a really twisted thing to believe that we can save anyone.
Mhm.
It's really weird.
Mhm. Well, what would you say at what point does someone know, like, this isn't going anywhere? This is, dead. This is expired. Like, what would you say the formula is? Or
I don't know that there's a formula. I think everyone has different levels of tolerance. I
Mhm.
think that everyone has different uh, layers of nuance that they have to work through, different stories that they have to work
Mhm.
through. Um, there are a lot of things. I think each journey is unique to itself, but I do know that when someone accepts it and they're like, "Oh, I really can't do this anymore." There's usually no turning back.
Oh, no. It's like the lens, the rose-colored glasses just fall off,
Mhm.
and truth is just seen.
Exactly.
Mm.
Too bright. Too bright.
No, I think you're right. There is no formula. I would say signs are like you're betraying yourself, you're feeling anxious, you're feeling sick, you're feeling stressed, the joy, there's no joy. You're more worried about the person than you are feeling connected. You're waiting for something to happen, you're waiting for them to change. Those are just
Right.
some signs. Mm.
Right.
So we're giving you permission to exit those relationships. And I do want to say, for me, I've liberated myself from many relationships, including significant familial relationships. And it's been one of the best things I've ever done. Like
Mhm.
that liberation has set me free to become who I want to become.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
couldn't do that in those relationships, not because I'm weak, but because I don't think we're meant to be in relationship to people, like even family, our whole lives. I feel like people serve a purpose as teaching us. Like
Mhm.
they're a teacher, there's an experience we're supposed to learn from or have, and then we need to know when to move on.
Mhm. I agree. I agree. If there's anything that astrology shows us is that everything is a cycle. Everything runs in cycles.
Mm,
So even in a relationship, there are parts of those relationships that do stay in your life that expire. There are parts of relationships that expire.
mm,
That's a little bit of a different topic, but the astrology shows us everything is in cycles. And so if you are in an expired relationship and you experience difficulty, it usually tends to be highlighted like with eclipses, for instance. Okay.
mm,
And some people actually stay together through eclipses, which to me blows my mind because it's like, man, that really showed you something really, really perhaps difficult. And some people stay. Okay. That's where you're at. But cycles come back around. You're going to have
mm,
to look at this again.
right.
Yeah.
Mm,
Okay. Number 9. Ooh, self-hatred on our bodies. The judgments you have are not your own.
mm,
So that one I think is so, I don't know. It's a thing for a lot of women, right? If not
mm,
most.
mm.
Um, how do you feel about that particular topic?
Oh, I mean, I think the judgments you have are not your own. I don't think we're taught to hate our I mean, I don't think we naturally hate our bodies. I think it's the reflections we get, the cultural expectations of bodies. I mean, we talked about this, like, I grew up at a time where, like, it was a time where, like, aerobics came out and, like, all these, like, diets, like shakes and diets, and, it was like, I was born in the 70s and 80s. I remember my mom always being on a diet,
Mhm.
and it was always like a shake or supplements or vitamins, and then like the idea of like, and that's when exercise started, kind of like aerobic centers, and like the idea of like going to gyms and things like that.
Yeah.
um and then around high school, I was the Kate Moss period,
Mm.
and I always wanted to be the type of girl that could, like, we talked about this yesterday, like pull her jeans up over her hips and they would just slide up and they would be baggy and hang off my hips. It's never ever happened. And so, like, having a muscular body, having curves, not having big boobs, like that was frowned upon. That was ugly. That was, you were supposed to have really skinny legs, skinny body, and a big chest. And that was what was sexy. And yeah, none of which I and I grew up in a family that was very critical and perfectionistic. Like the littlest thing, like, what is
Mhm.
that? You might have to get that surgically removed, or, it was like being under a microscope. And it's taken me years to undo that. And I've had body dysmorphia.
Yeah.
There were times when I had disordered eating because of it.
Mhm.
Um, but like, I'm the type of person that can feel good, and then I can look in a mirror and then my reflection will be really ugly and gnarly looking. And Blair always has to go, okay, like, you're not seeing the truth. Um, Now, having said all this, I feel like at this point in my life, I've embraced my body, and I know when it's healthy and I know when it's not. And that's my intention. I know when I'm treating it well, and I know when I'm not treating it well. And I like to feel good. I like to be active. Like to eat healthy. That makes me feel radiant and good. And if I'm not active or any of those things, I just don't feel good in my body. And it's not about size, it's about like strength and wholeness.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think it's important to like decide for yourself, like, what is important to you? What is meaningful to you? What do you want your body to feel and look like? And also honoring its natural expression.
Mhm.
Like the way I was raised, I couldn't even be that if I tried, unless I had surgical procedures, which I'm not willing to do. So,
Mm. Yeah, the relationship to our bodies is so it's been so distorted. I
mm,
mean, I I feel like I'm still going through this period in my own life of trying to decide how I want to move my body because
mm,
for a very long time, for over 10 years, the way that I moved my body and the way that I stayed in shape and fit was to do, hit workouts every single day, uh,
mm.
run 5 miles a day. Like it was crazy.
Intense. Sounds
It was
intense.
so intense. I'm like, I don't. Sometimes I wish I had that level of intensity for other things now. I can't imagine that. Um, but in therapy, I've realized, okay, there were other reasons like that, moving my body in that way and exercising so intensely was a way of coping with a lot of things that I was going through. And I also remember feeling like, because at the time, for the most part, I was single a lot of that time. I had to look good, right?
Mm,
I had to look good to be chosen, to be attractive. And when I think about that, I'm like, oh my God, ah, that's, it's a little sad,
mm,
and not like pity, but it's why go through all of that, put yourself through all of that and think that that's what you had to do
right,
for someone to love you,
right.
right? And so for me, the relationship with my body has been through so much in terms of that. I remember for the longest time I was a size 4.
Mm,
I mean, the longest time. And it was like one of my goals in life was to never ever be over size 4.
mm,
And anytime that my size 4s would start feeling tight, I would panic. And so I would start working out more, running more, eating less, all the things. And because I had created enough of enough of a routine in my system, I knew how to jump back into that.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then over the last couple of years, I would say over the last 3 years, as I started doing nervous system work, I realized how much working out in that way, exercising in that way so intensely actually messed with my nervous system.
Mhm.
It actually really put a lot of stress,
Yeah.
tons of cortisol. I mean, it was kind of like still being in an active survival state.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And so when I started doing nervous system work, a lot of that stuff came down, like I calmed down and my body naturally started rejecting. I remember it was like a switch. I
Mm.
remember it was like a switch of, I don't want to work out like this anymore.
Mm.
And so I started moving towards softer ways of moving my body, but I think there's still a part of me that says, I wish I could do that again. I wish I could
Mm.
still do that, move in that way. And I'm still in the process of figuring out what that is.
Mhm.
Now, what happened is that I went up to obviously a size, I went up in size, right? So I went up to a size 6. I'm kind of bordering between a 6 and an 8. I've gained weight and my relationship with my body is different right now because what I used to think was fat,
Mhm.
I'm like, "Oh my god, how could I have how what was going on in my head that I said that was fat?"
Mhm.
And I think about it now, and to be able to be comfortable with my body in the way that it is now is huge for me. I've definitely that has been a journey of many years, I think.
Well, I mean, what I heard you saying, it's like the society gives you definitions of like what's fat, and even like I saw a reel of someone fitting into a dress for some gala or something. It was, first of all, it was so hard for me to watch. Like,
Yeah,
with everything going on, we're doing some sort of
right,
gala or whatever.
right.
And the celebrity was like, make me look as skinny as possible. And this is a curvy woman. And I was like, you're better than that. I was
Mhm,
just like, why? We're still doing that. Kind of shocks me. I don't really watch any celebrity stuff. So it
mhm,
was kind of a shock to my nerve system because I used to be all into that and now I'm not. I don't want that shit in my head. Um, but I think even as women, like with our cycle and like our weight can fluctuate. Like my weight, man, it's fluctuating. If I'm ovulating, it's fluctuating. I just feel like,
mhm,
all the things, but I just feel like there's a lack of generosity and there's a lack of compassion and kindness around it that we've internalized. And
mhm,
so it's this like, you know, we put these rules and this rigidity around our bodies and we abuse them to look the way society says is acceptable, which doesn't take into consideration that if you look at women and men, um, look at all genders, we're all shaped differently.
mhm,
We're all shaped so differently. Like, how many are really the same size or have the, how can we put limitations on the human body because there's so many differences and it's terrible. And what if it was beautiful? What if we loved it? What would that be like? And the thing I've come to around like working out and all that, I just do activity that I love. Like, I
mhm,
love to surf, I love to swim, I love to walk, I love to skate. Like,
mhm.
that's and if it requires anything beyond that, I'm not into it. If it requires like I'm gonna go do this for 30 minutes, I'm like, nope.
Right. Yeah,
So I
yeah.
think finding things that you love
Mhm.
to do that help move your body are really beautiful.
I think so too. I think that again, that like that time constraint or whatever it is, it just feels so it creates a contraction in my body.
Yes.
It's so different. It's so different now.
Like, you got to fit this in at 6 in the morning before you go to work,
Right.
right? And then you're going to go to a building and like you're going to watch TV as you exercise. There's things like I remember going to the gym and I'm not judging anyone that does it, and it disconnects us from our
Mhm.
body and what it really wants. And so I
Mhm.
just would encourage that, like, what would it look like to turn to our bodies and like decide, like, what do we believe? What do we want to feel about this? How do we want to treat it?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And this takes us to our last point, number 10. You are allowed to be angry.
Yes.
That's a big one.
Yes.
All of
Still
these
in
are,
process.
yeah, yeah. Um, do you want to say more on that? How so?
I think I realized that, I mean, there have been many things that have inhibited my self expression, but being thought of as a bitch or like
Mm,
a nag, I'm not talking about my partner, but in growing up, there was a lot of that misogynistic culture around like any woman that expressed her opinion was a nag or a
mm,
bitch, or a pain in the ass. And so when I feel angry or want to exercise my voice or exercise a boundary, I notice there's a couple of, again, not in my home life with people close to me, but I feel like in interactions in the world, when I want to stand up for myself or maybe ask for what I need, I notice I have to jump through some mental hoops to be able to get to like, I have the right to say this does not work for me, or I do not want this, or this does not feel okay.
mhm,
You know, and I think there are lots of people that don't feel like they have a voice. I know that women have really struggled with these labels
mhm,
around being big and powerful and angry. Being angry was just like a no-no. And then when you have a parent that's angry, it looks like I never want to be like her. So I know that was another model where I was like, I would rather be kind of meek and quiet and like easy to be around because
mhm,
she was so difficult.
mhm.
And the way I internalized that was not helpful. So I'm still in process because I don't think allowing myself to be angry and express myself is my first go-to yet, where I would like it to be.
Yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard. I think even for women who are more okay with being more expressive or, spicy as
Mhm.
they're called. Um, my journey with anger has been interesting because I don't have an issue like addressing or expressing it. I don't have an issue like addressing when something's bothering me. And it doesn't feel good afterwards. Like
Mm,
the judgment in the past of people who have crossed a line and I have made it known that it's not okay. And, the backlash that I've gotten from that, like being called a bitch and a lot of awful things, it's so hurtful. And what it
mhm.
created was a lot of doubt
Yeah.
throughout my life, a lot of self doubt, a
Mhm.
lot of like, well, am I really? Was I out of line? Was I, you know, just questioning my own reality.
Mhm.
And as I've gotten older and done a lot of processing, I realized no, that for the most part, those were people who were trying to control
Mhm.
me and my reaction to things. Those were people who did not like that someone was calling them out on their shit.
Mhm.
And so, they do what people do when they find themselves in those situations and are not mature at all, emotionally mature at all, is, all of a sudden you're a bitch. All of a sudden you're these awful things. And
Mhm.
so, and I think that in some ways it did make me meek. I think it did. I think what it did is that over time I really just started isolating from people.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of anger there. There was a lot of anger that was unexpressed,
Mhm.
right? So it would go from me speaking my mind, calling something out, to then being like, well, why are you so quiet? Right. And what I realized is that in both cases, I was still coming from a place where I was trying to be accepted or I was trying to be perhaps seen a certain way, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, and realizing, no, if something pisses me off enough, I'm going to say something about it. I'm not an idiot. right? We can have we can go at it. I'm not afraid of having big discussions. And it doesn't have to get to like a really volatile place. But the older I get, the more okay I get with that. And I think a lot of it has to do with realizing people have a really difficult time addressing difficult situations. And so if
Mhm.
you stay in that space, you're never going to have clarity in your life. You're never going to have clarity in your relationships.
No.
Someone has to say the thing,
Yes.
and then everything else will fall as it may.
Yeah. Well, that's the beautiful thing about anger is like life energy rising.
Mhm,
To me, it's clarity rising. It's like, this is not okay. It's the body telling you, I need something different, or there needs to be a different choice, or it wants to exercise a boundary. And I think what happens when we don't allow ourselves to be angry, we repress that clarity and knowing, and
mhm.
then we betray ourselves or adjust and I did that for so long, and then
Right.
or sometimes it would build up to the point where then I did look a little whack because I was like, rah,
Mhm.
you know. Um, but I think we have to honor, like, I'm angry, be curious about it. There's a reason why you're angry. Take a moment, take a pause, and then decide, how do I want to express this? I mean, we're talking about like mindful expression. We're not talking about
Right.
raging on somebody.
Right.
Um, right? But I also am learning to get comfortable with the ripple that's created from me expressing something that doesn't make someone uncomfortable. And that's the part. It's one thing to express it, it's another to be present for the energetic ripple between you and that person.
Mhm.
And to sit with that being okay and to know that you don't have to be like okay with everyone all the time. Like,
Right.
you will get through it. And one thing I love about my family dynamic right now with my sons and my husband is that they will let me know when something's not okay. I will let them know when something's not okay. It's very clean. It's
Mhm.
like we can take responsibility and we can move on. There's not all this like, it has to mean so much. It's like, I think my kids know that we're honest and they're honest in return. And that's beautiful. Like, it's
Oh my
just so nice.
yes. Yes. That's what I wanted to say next is that we're taught that anger and expressing anger is a bad thing.
Yeah.
We're taught that it's a bad thing. And God, that's horrible.
Horrible. It's
That's
horrible.
so hurtful
Yeah.
to tell someone that you're having this really big experience inside of you and then for someone to tell you you're bad for that.
Yes.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Fuck. I mean, it explains a lot of, the state of the world, right?
Yes. Yes. I
But
mean, we do it in so many ways to everyone.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And yeah, I mean, we could go into how that trickles down to, women, men, what that does, all of those things.
Races. It's just, yeah.
Right. All of it. Um, and no, we need to get okay with it. I think, I don't know, anger is really beautiful.
I was going to say it's beautiful. It's
Yeah.
really beautiful because it is so clear.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's part of the human experience. We need it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Without it, like, anger is truth rising amongst a lot of bullshit,
Right.
And
Exactly.
I know, as like, for me, when I feel it, it's like my intuition going, pay attention now
Hmm.
to whatever's happening. It's my body saying, pay attention.
I think Carlos, my partner, he is really the first person in my life who reflected back to me my the unhealthy relationship I had with anger.
Mm.
And what ended up happening was that I was realizing, oh, first off, he's not here trying to attack me. He's not against me, right? So anger doesn't mean, because anger for a long time was a way of protecting myself, defending myself, right? So whenever anger arose with anyone, it was like I have to protect myself from them. And so I
Mm.
would come at him earlier in in our relationship that way. It's like ready to fight. And it's
Mhm.
like, no, that's not what this is about. It's like we are allowed to be angry, and it doesn't mean that I'm attacking you. We're just
Right.
having like a really big moment right now. And it took some time. It took some processing to understand that. And now you're right. It's very now it doesn't have to get to that space
Mhm.
because it's okay to say the things. And it's like, okay, oh, I see. I didn't realize I did that. I'm sorry. Or this is what I meant. It's just clean, right? But it's
Yeah.
not something that is, because in the past, especially in my childhood, anger was also something that was used like as a manipulative tactic,
Yeah.
right? So we have to be, I think it becomes a really big responsibility for us to understand those nuances and recognize and realize that anger is not a bad thing. We just have to, I think, learn what our relationship is with it and what it's really trying to tell us when it comes up.
Yeah, and when you said as children, sometimes we learn it as a we it's enacted as a manipulative tactic. I think for a lot of kids, um, when a parent was angry, they didn't feel loved. Like there was emotional abandonment after the parent would rage and then leave the room,
Hmm.
and the child was like left, or the child would be throwing a tantrum and they were isolated to their room, and there's no connection or love. And when you said that, it reminded me of like one of the things is we can be angry at each other. And I've learned this with Lara. We can be angry at each other, but you still love me. There's a constancy of our connection in our relationship that can
Yep.
weather this. And I don't think a lot of us have felt that before. And one of the things I've always told my kids is when I'm angry, I still love you. Like this idea we're not supposed to get angry at our kids, like I just don't believe that. I believe our kids need to see like that we're human, and
Right.
we have to be mindful in how we express it. But I'll even say to my kids, I'm angry. And they're like, we know you still love us. And I love that they say that to me because kids
Right.
piss you off and I
Right.
piss them off. It's very real.
Right.
And if we can nurture and stay connected in that anger, then I think we can start to heal and our relationships can really grow from it.
Absolutely. Oh my God, yes. That's a great way to end that. That when we learn what our relationship to our anger is and how we express it and how we channel it, because it can actually be expressed mindfully.
Yeah.
uh, I've said to Carlos, I can't right now. I can't with you right now. I need a moment. I need a moment.
I can't imagine Carlos ever. I don't even know him. I'm just kidding.
Right, right. And so it's the space, and then we come back and we discuss it, and we might still be angry, and that's okay. That's different, and that's incredibly empowering in a relationship. I think in
Yeah,
the long run it only makes you stronger.
exactly.
It really only does.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So, these are 10 things we wish we could have told our younger selves. Know that you still can.
Mhm.
You still can connect to that younger self and let them know all of these things are okay. None of them made you bad, right?
Mhm.
And there's a lot of healing in that. We're just the ones who have to be in a relationship with all of these components to ourselves so that we truly understand what's happening inside of us.
Yeah, exactly. I hope these were helpful. Do you have anything coming up that you want to share?
Let's see. Not anything new. Still have readings, coaching. Um, check out the YouTube channel. I have the weekly forecasts on there. I'm really enjoying doing those. Uh, it's really nice to communicate and connect with people from different parts of the world. So connect to the Astro Consciousness YouTube channel and check out the weekly forecasts on there.
And we're starting our YouTube channel.
Yes.
We will be starting it soon. We will definitely announce it, but you can catch us on YouTube. And we hope you enjoy that. And then we both have new websites going to be launched soon.
Oh, that's
I
right.
hope it's okay. I
Yeah.
know. And we're going to have new offerings and just all sorts of different things. I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah.
Um, gonna just drop that as the possibility that's happening soon. But I'm excited about all those things. So thank y'all for listening.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you all. Thank you all so much.
Okay, bye.
Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button and hit that notification bell to be updated on new videos.
Click the video on screen to watch more episodes.